the most important part is to have the growth mindset.
Henry, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I commonly said I was made in China. As a kid, I moved to Australia with my family, and I did school there. So I was packaged in Australia, and then now I'm marketed and distributed in the US because that's really one of the major tech markets and tech industries. That's where it's at. So yeah.
Awesome. I know that you work at Lyft. Can you tell me a little bit about like what you do there?
I lead a team focusing on in-memory data stores. So things like our caching infrastructure, things like our non-persistent data, so things that are not persistent. So they're temporary, things like streaming. So yeah, really part of the infrastructure that are building on top of AWS cloud. So
Gotcha. So on your LinkedIn profile, it says you're an engineering manager, and
yep.
I always kind of was curious about like what the interview process will look like for, I would say, like leaders or, like more of a senior engineers. Would you be able to share a little bit about maybe your experience?
Yeah, sure. So for those who don't know, for engineers, like really go into like two major career path, right? One is the individual contributor route. One is the people manager route. But as you become more senior, there is always going to be a lot of leading people, influencing people, influencing the organizations, just from slightly different perspective. So for people who are just starting out as an engineer, the interview process might involve heavy coding. So you might have like 1 or 2 rounds of coding, and then you have some behavioral or cultural interviews, and then you have maybe one system design. So if you go as more of a senior IC route, then the weight on the system design is much heavier. So you might be down to like 1 round of coding because company want to make sure like you can code, but that will be a much smaller weight than say 2 rounds of system designs. And then there would still be some behavior and cultural interviews to make sure that you are a good fit. So no companies really want brilliant assholes. And then whereas for people manager route, the coding question, typically the coding round is out, but you would still have at least 1 system design interview. And then there will be an increased focus on behavioral, culture, and team. And maybe some companies will have execution. So how you execute through execute to meet your goals and commitments and things like that. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
And coding interviews are just going to be like given a question from the interviewer, and then you just figure out.
I think there are different companies that have apply different strategies. So there are companies that what they consider to be, they want to make sure that you are you have good intellectual horsepower, as they say. So they try to give you more challenging coding questions, but then they want to focus more on the algorithm and data structure side of things to make sure like you have your system fundamentals, but you are also able to solve very challenging technical problems. And then there are companies that focus more on, like typically smaller startups. They focus a lot because they don't have as long kind of ramp up times, because their runway might be not that long, right? If you say, hey, it take me 6 months to ramp up, their company might be going out of business in 6 months. So they focus more on that you are able to hit the ground running. So they focus more on maybe like slightly easier algorithm questions, but they have an emphasis on making sure like you write your code compiles, everything runs correctly. And so for Lyft, it's a bit of both. In the multiple rounds, there is definitely a round where you will expect to have complete solutions, and then there are rounds where it's more about algorithms. So.
Gotcha. And I would assume that as an engineering manager, you're a people manager. And can you maybe tell me a little bit about your responsibilities there?
Yeah. So I'm one of those few that jump between IC and engineering managers multiple times in my career. It really depends on what the organization needs for me, because I'm comfortable in both shoes. And so I guess in a team, there really is three questions. What problem we solve, how we solve those problems, and who does what, right? So in terms of the senior IC or the tech leads, it's really focusing on the what and the how. And then for engineering managers, you work with the kind of the senior ICs on the what, and then you really solve the who problem. So you I think a big part of the job is really mentoring, as well as like kind of making sure like everyone's accountable and executed. And also things like team cultures are very important. So yeah.
Love the way you explained it, like what, how, and who. That's as simple as it can be, but so much true in any organization, actually. So like, what does your day to day look like? Do you have a lot of meetings, or do you know, like what does it look like?
I guess because my background is engineers, I tend to not like meetings. I'm very commonly known for killing meetings, especially recurring meetings. But we do have meetings. So the way I guess it's less about day, but like I structure my week. So I structure like Monday and Friday to be with like one-on-ones meetings, people that I need to regularly sync up with as much as possible. Sure. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are really more like kind of around projects or like regular team syncs, or like meetings with other teams, because we're part of the infrastructure org. We have a lot of meetings with other people. But yeah, like I believe like it is whatever that is quickest get to results. So very often I would kind of, if people think it's an hour meeting, I will try to reduce it to half an hour. And so yeah, but reduce the chance. But sometimes meetings are unavoidable, right? So it's good for communications. So
you mentioned a little bit about, you know, the cultural fit and stuff when you were explaining about the interview process. Can you maybe share a bit about Lyft's culture? I would assume that it's a important aspect that they do put it in the interview process.
Yeah. So as a technology company, I think Lyft have a lot of like the common cultural elements, but one of the things that really stood out to me is that Lyft really has this reputation of being the nicer guys among rideshares, and that really shines through. And it's not a facade. There is a very strong emphasis on collaborations and also really strong emphasis on communications, especially like across teams, and have a very inclusive culture. I think that really is something that stood out.
Gotcha. Okay. Shifting gears a little bit, I want to learn more about you and how you, in your career path. So, can you maybe tell me a little bit about like what got you into engineering? Like, what did you study when you were, and like, why did you choose to, go that route?
I love to say like, as a kid, I have these grand plans, but that would be a lie. I, I think I was very into, arts and science, and,
Oh, okay.
uh, my parents, and being Asian parents, tend to have a very strong influence on their kids' career. Was more into kind of stable jobs like accountants, and computer engineering is a compromise that I was good at, and yeah, and I think the more I did it, the more I kind of fell in love with it. So, but yeah, I did took one accounting class because that was required for computer engineering school, and I quickly knew that I would hate my life if that's the route I went down. So yeah, I'm pretty happy.
What did you major in?
So I went to school in Australia, which is slightly different than US. So my major is really computer engineering, and we do both electrical and so both hardware and
Okay.
and software. And I actually, this is a long time ago. This is like 20 years ago. I actually did quite a bit of AI in my undergrad. But
Interesting.
as the career unfolds, I didn't do a lot of that in my actual career. So yeah.
Does most of the engineers working in tech companies, do they almost all of them have a similar background, like engineering major in, for example, computer science or computer?
Yeah, I think people generally majored in uh, computer engineering, computer science, and like I think there are some like software engineering or electrical engineering. So I I think having those degrees do give you a advantage, because you tend to, if you go to a reasonable school, right, you get a more systematic understanding of the field, versus from self-starters. But then there are a lot of people who like came from like a math background or a physics background, or like these days, people came from like bootcamps, right? So they don't actually go to get a degree in that. So I think, historically, most companies really focus on the kind of the ability to solve problems, especially in startups, than focusing on the kind of school. Unless you go to Ivy League school, then
Hmm.
you get a little bit of a bonus.
Yeah.
But that gets you as far as getting the interview, right? So
Yeah.
for people who are starting out, you have to kind of, again, logically and systematically solve the problems. So is it a problem of you not getting the interviews, or is it you are not passing the interview? Two different problems
Yep.
might require different solutions. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, so you said there are actually two routes for, I want to understand a little bit more about the engineering engineers, I would say, career path. Like
Okay.
you mentioned a little bit about the individual contributor route, and then the other is probably the people management.
Yeah.
How how is it different, and like who should choose which? Like, is there like a rule of thumb that someone with more of a, I would say, I don't know, like a coding expert should be, in the IC route or something like that?
Yeah. So regardless of which route you take, the higher you go, the amount of time you actually spend on coding typically reduces. Of course, there are like, um, unusual standouts in any industry. There are people who are very senior and they still do quite a bit of coding because that's what they're passionate about. But those are very, very far and few in between. I think I would put it this way. So if what you are really passionate about is solving technical problems, then you probably should go with the IC route. And if you're more passionate about solving people problems, and like kind of organizing the team structure, the company structure, that sort of thing, you really should go people manager route.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned it briefly about boot camps.
Yeah.
Do you have any, I would say, opinion, or what do you think about them?
I don't have a fully formal opinions on that. We do have someone from our team that is embedded from a boot camp, and it's kind of a, I guess, extended internships, and I, quite frankly, I think the quality of boot camps vary a lot. So yeah. So it depends on what your situation, right? So
yeah,
maybe not everyone can really kind of spend the time or the money to go through like a full degree, right? So maybe bootcamp is a good solution, but there are so much online resources. So I guess that would be helpful for someone who don't have any contact and just need someone to kind of run them, like, but more systematically to get a job, right?
Gotcha. I think this will be my last question today. Do you have like any advice for those people who want to start a career in like engineering?
Yeah, I think the most important part is to have the growth mindset. And by growth mindset, I meant there is the belief that intelligence and abilities are learned over time, or can be learned over time, right? So not be afraid of making mistakes, not like, whereas kind of the fixed mindset is really about people believing that, oh, if I did something wrong, that's a reflection of me, right? And so people are afraid to make mistakes. People are afraid to ask stupid questions because people are thinking, oh, that is going to be a reflection of my intelligence. And I would say, like, that is the wrong way to think about it. If you don't know something, it just meant you don't know something yet. And asking those stupid questions, figuring those things out is the way to actually learn them. And of course, not everyone in the industry have that sort of culture. So really should look out for environments that allows you to learn. And I would say don't optimize for short-term incomes unless you are you're coming up close to your retirement or something. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But optimize for learning, especially when you're just starting out. That would be the most important thing. And also just dig a little bit deeper as an engineer. That really would accelerate your learning later on. So rather than learning about this and that framework, being in the industry for a long time, there are trends and there are fads, just like infections, right? There is new technologies coming all the time. But the only way that you can stay ahead of the curve is really by digging a little bit deeper so that you can learn the new things much faster, much more efficient. And there is nothing new under the sun. I mean, there are innovative technology, but nothing comes out of the vacuum. It's always built on existing things. And so, like, really understanding what's kind of the old existing framework allows you to just learn the delta or the difference or what is new in this thing rather than the whole thing. And whereas if you just stay at the level of learning how to use certain language or certain framework without understanding how those things work under the hood, then you are starting from scratch every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it challenging to stay ahead.
Yeah. No, those are really, really good points. I especially love the growth mindset part. I think it's really, really valuable to have that. Anyway, thank you so much, Henry, for your time today. Really, really appreciate it.